Welcome back. Remembering African Wild Dogs is the sixth book in the celebrated Remembering Wildlife fundraising series, which has so far raised more than 17 million rand for conservation projects since its inception back in 2016. The aim of its creators is to make the most beautiful photo book ever seen on a species and to use that to raise awareness of the plight facing that particular animal and raise funds to protect it. Margot Raggett is the founder of Remembering Wildlife, and she joins us now via Zoom to tell us more about this initiative as well as their newly released offering. Margot, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure having you join us this morning on Morning Live. Before we get into the Remembering African Wild Dogs book, just talk to us about what the Remembering Wildlife initiative is all about.
Well, it started 6 years ago after an elephant that had been poached, and I was so angry. That was up in Kenya, actually, but I was so angry. I thought I needed to raise awareness of poaching and try and raise money to help the fight for poaching. So I asked 50 photographers at the time if they'd donate images for a book, our first, which was called Remembering Elephants, with the idea that it would be the most beautiful book ever seen on elephants and that all the funds raised would go to conservation. And that was so successful that we've gone on now to do 5 more books, so that the Wild Dog book is the latest, but we've done rhinos, great apes, lions, cheetahs in between. And we've raised more than 17 million rand for conservation projects with these books. So, yeah, it's going really much better than I ever imagined.
Right. And I understand that Remembering Wildlife has worked with nearly 200 photographers since its inception in 2016. Tell us more about this.
Yes, as I said, so we started with just 50 that I tried to approach and ask to come on board with the elephant book. But over time, as our fame has grown, other photographers have been keen to support and involved too. We've worked with many of the world's best wildlife photographers. So from South Africa, you've got people like Greg du Toit, Shem Compion, Daryl and Shana Balfour. But it's a kind of who's who of wildlife photographers who contribute to these. And I'm so lucky they all give their work for free because they know that it helps us to raise for conservation.
And now let's get right into Remembering African Wild Dogs. To take us through this series.
Yeah, so obviously this is the latest book, and outside of Africa, African wild dogs are probably the least well known of all the animals I've covered, but I felt their story really needed to be told. They're a magnificent species. Actually, in South Africa, it's one of the places where the numbers are stable or even slightly going up, but elsewhere, you know, they're down and they've been really persecuted over the years. There's lots of myths that are untrue about them, and I wanted to make this to try and correct that. I've already been able to make our first donation, which is amazing. So working with African parks and with the Endangered Wildlife Trust, we were able to help the translocation of tracks into Malawi earlier this year, so sort of July, August time, repopulate Malawi with wild dogs who'd actually not had wild dogs since the 1950s. But thanks to fantastic work of, say, those two organisations, now hopefully they might actually see wild dogs go up in numbers there again. They've even had puppies since they were translocated, which is amazing.
Who are some of the photographers that you featured in this volume?
Well, as I mentioned, Daryl and I mentioned Shem and Greg du Toit. We've also got, on a kind of more international basis, people like Frans Lanting, Art Wolf, Jonathan and Angela Scott, Marcel van Oosten. So many of them are kind of international award-winning photographers who've been in some of the biggest competitions in the world, like Wildlife Photographer of the Year. So I'm lucky I get to pick from the very best photographers and pick their best work on the species to put together a collection that's, no one had ever done it before, getting all these together to donate their best work to a book purely on one species. So it's a real luxury that I get to choose from such amazing work.
Just how vulnerable are these painted wolves across the continent? Would you say that this species is under threat?
Yes, as I said, it's a very patchy picture, to use an analogy to their fur. So as I said, in South Africa, in the way that wildlife management in Africa, the numbers have actually been stabilised and if not slightly going up. But in other places, we don't even know how many there are because it's very hard to, because they travel such long distances and they're very difficult to collar. And, you know, in many places we're hearing they're just disappearing. So, for example, in Malawi, as I said, that we know they've been gone since the 1950s. So if conservationists don't get the funds to help protect them, they are in real danger of disappearing.
Now, let's talk about some of the photographs that have made the cut for this book and the kind of stories that they tell about African wild dogs.
Yeah, well, we always, in all of our books, try and tell the story of the species. So we start off with them very young. So at the beginning of this book, you've got pictures of kind of suckling at the den and the mother kind of returning to the den or carrying the cubs around. So, you know, in their first few months, they stay very much at the den. But this is a wonderful thing. They're always left with a babysitter. So when the pack goes off to hunt, they usually leave someone behind to make sure that the pups are safe because they're very vulnerable at that age. And then when they've hunted, they actually come back and they actually bring back the den to feed both the babysitter and to feed the pups. So they regurgitate the food that they've hunted. And that's another wonderful, we don't see any regurgitation, but we see them feeding. The way that dogs look after each other is amazing. And then there's pictures of them playing, their greeting ceremony. When they wake up from having slept, they greet each other as if they haven't seen each other for 20 years. It's amazing. It's so sweet to see how they act before they go off to hunt. And then we've got pictures of them hunting. So, yeah, we really try and tell the life story of these animals.
Now, the proceeds raised from the sales of Remembering Wildlife have supported about 54 projects in 24 countries. I mean, you guys are doing really amazing work. What other forms of support do you have?
Thank you. Well, so we raise our funds through crowdfunding our books every year. So in advance of making a book, I announce I'm going to do it, and I ask people to give me the money to make it now, and then they'll get the book in the future. And that allows us to then print our books so that we're ready to launch. We can actually just go out and get them out to people. And all of the profits from those, because they're already paid for, is what we're then able to donate on to conservation. But the way other people have come on board to donate safaris for us, paintings, artwork, sculptures. So people have really kind of coalesced with this project and decided that they want to, whatever they can do to support us, they will. Even jewellery, I've got this wonderful earring of elephants here made by our jeweller. So all of the stuff that we sell then, all of the profits can go to the project. So it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is amazing.
What other projects are in the pipeline for the Remembering series?
I always say that if I told everyone, or for every person who asked me that, if they gave me $1, then I wouldn't need to make. So you owe me $1. No, at this stage, I don't know yet for sure. We've just launched African Wild. I need to concentrate on doing a really good job at that. But when I come up for some air over Christmas, I'll start to think about what might come next. But certainly the series isn't done. You know, I thought it would be a one-off with elephants. Okay. We've done 6 now, and there's more to come.
Okay, Margot, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us, and keep up the good work.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Great stuff. All right, that was, well, joining us all the way from the United Kingdom, that's Remembering Wildlife founder Margot Raggett, and we've been speaking to her about their new book titled Remembering African Wild Dogs.